We're going to do a piece of Maharal from Nesivas Oilam. There are 32 Nesivas in Sefer Nesivas. One of them is called Nesiv Ho'anova. It's appropriate because Anova, humility, is the key for a person's Kabbalah Satira. And as we're going to learn tonight from the Maharal, it's also the key to be extremely wealthy. Allah hashpur service. You would think that sometimes arrogant people are wealthy, but it depends what kind of wealth you're talking about. There could be wealth that a person has that's unfortunately from his schar that a person gets. And then there could be wealth where the Eibishter himself is mashpia through you. That means that he gives you the opportunity to deliver and give out his nechasim. So like this, as you can see, it begins with Perek Ches. Midas Anova, he shegoyrim loy shezoicha latayra. Midas Anova is what is the trigger. It's the goyrim for a person to have a schus for Torah. This paragraph, which is Perek Ches, the last of Nesiva Anova, Gidaminim Perakama de Tainis, Amar Rav Chanina Bar Idi, Loma Nimsho Divrei Torah Lamayim. Dichsev have a cold summer. If you're thirsty, l'chu lamayim. The Gemara learns ma mayim enichem mokem gavoy v'hochem mokem namuch. Mayim goes from a high spot and goes to a low spot. Av divrei Torah ein miskaimim. It stays al bamisha daitay shfola. A person who is shafel, a person who is humble. V'kvar marnu ki anova. Yesh bay hapshitus biyoser is the person who has simplicity. Very often, a person gets in the way of himself in order, and he is his own biggest enemy when it comes to being successful in life. When a person is set in his or her ways, and a person is, this is who I am, and you can't change me. You ever heard a person say that? That's a person that can't be makabel. And if a person can't be makabel means to receive. You want to tell someone something. You want to give them an eitzah, and they're not able to listen. If they're not able to listen, they're not able to grow. If they're not able to listen, they're not able to change. If they're not able to listen, they're not able to receive. They're not able to receive, they stay exactly where they were. Why is this week's Parsha called Parshas Yisro? Because it says, Vayishma Yisro. Yisro was makabel, right? His zchus. He was a goy, and he came to convert, and he was makabel. And the first story it tells us about Yisro, it's a fascinating story. He tells his son-in-law, Loi toiv hadavar sha'ata oisa. Who in Klal Yisro would have the chutzpah to tell Moshe Rabbeinu? Who would have the audacity to tell Moshe Rabbeinu, Loi toiv hasha'ata oisa? Only his shver. Only a shver can say that. But you know what? Moshe listened. Moshe was eichet makabel. It's not coincidental that the Torah Kedosha, the introduction to this week's Kabbalah Satira, is two stories, both of them bringing out the point of a people who were daiton shvelam. That means they were able and roy to be makabel. That's a midah of anivus. That's a midah of what's called pshitus, simplicity. When a person has that level of simplicity, ich ken heren, I'm ready to listen. That's one of the midos necessary for Kabbalah Satira. She goyrim loy shezoicha el atayra. V'lefichach ro midah zoicha el atayra shu seichel aposhet. V'agasus, a person who is gas, thick, either because he's a Baal Gaiva or because he's a Baal Taiva. I didn't translate it yet. Seichel HaPoshit means, the Maharal uses this lashon to mean that is it's the Seichel that, it's Yashrus, and it's a Seichel that doesn't get mixed up by any type of negias. There's no negias. That means it's able to be makabel things the way they are. It's simple. Maybe we'll be masber. What's that? Heifach she midas gashmias. V'chol ze mepnei balgas ruach. That's why I gave the example of a person who can't listen, a person who's incapable of being makabel. Heipach hapshitas, ki kol poshet lo yugdar v'lo yugbal. Something which is simple, there's never a situation where a person isn't willing, in Yiddish we would call it to shtel sich zu, to be makabel, to listen, to receive. ומי שיש בי גאיבה בדייטי ובמחשבוסוי שהוא נבדל משאר בני אדם, a person who is a Baal Gaiva, a person who holds of himself, the more zich there is, the more sense of self that the person has, the less capable that the person is in order to be makabel. He's not able to listen and he's not able to receive or be who's rochik min apshitus biyoser. V'ramzu chachamim zal. I'll tell you where this remez is. It comes from a shtickle Gemara. Most of the Gemaras of Kabbalah Satira are found in Shabbos and Daf Pei Tes. We learned one earlier. Here, Shmuel, this is the original. It's the one for Geniza. It says the Maharal, quoting a Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi b'shashi yared Moshe lefnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When Moshe left, the Gemara we quoted before and was Moshe was up in Shamayim to get the Torah. After the Eibishter was maskim to give the Torah, Moshe Rabbeinu went down. I'll read to you what he's referencing. Rebbeinu Shalom, Torah in Heichahu. Where's the Torah? Amar Eloi Nesatia la'aretz. It's in the Aretz. Holach etzel Aretz, Amalai Torah heichen, Amalai Alekim haven dracha. The Aretz says, I don't know, the Eibishter knows. Holach etzel Yam, Amalai Eini Modi. Holach etzel Tchaim, Amalai Ein Bi. Every single line the Maharal explains. And then eventually, Amar Lefanav, he goes back to the Rebbeinu Shalom, Rebbeinu Shalom chipasti b'chol Aretz le'metzasiyah. I looked everywhere. I looked in the Yam, I looked in the Tahaim, I looked here, I looked everywhere. I can't find it. Amaloi lech etzel ben Amram. Maharal says, he didn't even call him Moshe. He didn't even call him Moshe. Just Ben Amram. Amram's kid. He doesn't even have a name. Holach etzel Moshe. Amaloi, the Satan says to Moshe, what'd you do with the Torah? I already know the Eibishter gave it to you. What'd you do with it? You think he gave it to me? What am I that he gave me the Torah? Moshe, your badoi means to say like you're a joker. Badoi yata, Rashi says, or betmiya. You know, Eibishter, you have a cheshbon why you gave it to me. Honestly, I have no idea why you gave it to me. It's not shaykh to me. The fact that you told the Satan that you gave it to me as though Ki'ilu I deserve it, I don't know. You gave it to me. I guess you didn't have where to put it. But I should take credit for this. Concludes the Gemara. Amar le HaKadosh Baruch Hu Moshe hoyo v'mi'atas atzmecha tikra al shemecha zichru Toiras Moshe Avdi. Zichru Toiras Moshe. Says the Maharal, the Gemara is teaching us that Moshe Rabbeinu's midah of anova, his midah of taking absolutely no credit for himself, was the recipe necessary for him to be the Mekabel HaTorah, ad kidei kach, that it's more than just he's a Mekabel HaTorah. The Torah is identified with Moshe Rabbeinu. The smaller a person makes himself, the more he or she is a conduit to be able to have the Eibishter be mashpia through him. Because Eibishter, ich bin garnished, I'm nothing. So whatever you're giving me is really what you're doing, ich tu garnished. Look at the Lashon of Maharal in the next paragraph. Maharal says like this, Umuchach, we'll start from here. Ki kemoi shegas ruach rochok min haseichol hanivdol haposhet, kach ro'u la'aniyas mamish. Do Omar Mar siman legasis ruach aniyas. Va'af agav demukila b'aniyas shel Torah. I want to read a little bit. Mekomo kam kiven de komar siman legas ruach aniyas. V'gam amaksha shom haven shois aniyas is mamish ad de metaretz aniyas shel Torah. Mashma de beloshen zava kol aniyas. Rak sheyoiser shaykh aniyas shel Torah. Mipnei shezeh b'vadi aniyas gomor. Va'akol utam echad. Lefi advar masher zbaru. Ki ha'oisher, wealth, bracha, v'shefa min Hashem Yisborach. Whatever influence the Eibishter gives to the world, money, shefa, bracha, seichel. The more that a person is a gashmi, the less he's more of a receiver. The more that he's a gashmi, the more guf he is. The more guf he is, the less he has shaykhs to hashpa, to the Eibishter, to influence. The kemoisha atayra nimshalas min b'mayim, kach abracha v'ashefa min Hashem Yisborach nimshol amayim. The more that a person takes no credit, the less that he becomes, the less that he is for himself, the more he is connected to the Eibishter. So he becomes a tzinor. He becomes like a pipe because the Eibishter works through him. The Gemara says, when a person's a Baal Gaiva, Ein ani v'hu yachol lider ba'olam. In as much as there's an ani, says the Eibishter, and there's a who, there's somebody else, to that extent, that's how a person is separated from Hashem, and we cannot be together. The less that a person is an ani v'hu, which means the more that a person is a conduit for the Eibishter, the more a person is the source of shefa. In the Zera Shimshon Shir, we spoke about the fact that the Eibishter created a person with a guf and with a neshama. When HaKadosh Baruch Hu created Adam, he took the guf, vayitzu Hashem Elokim es Adam ofra min Adama, vayipach ba'apav nishmas chayim. He put in a neshama. He put in a neshama. The Torah Kedosha doesn't just say he put in a neshama. Vayipach ba'apav. He blew a neshama in. He blew a neshama. He blew a neshama means man de nofach, says Chazal midilei nofach. It came from him, which means that Eibishter didn't just give life to Adam. The Eibishter put part of himself, kaviyachol, the neshama, which is the name of the soul, which came from the neshima, which came from the breath. He blew in, kaviyachol, the Eibishter put a chelek elokai mimal in every single person. The fact that a human being, as we just saw in the previous Gemara in the Zera Shimshon Shir, said Moshe Rabbeinu put his hand and held on to the Kisei HaKavod, that's only someone that has a neshama which comes from Tachas Kisei HaKavod can go back to Kisei HaKavod. In the in the fight between malachim and people, malachim are in a high madrega, much higher than human beings, but they don't have neshamas. They don't have neshamas. They don't have a guf that comes from down here, and they don't have a neshama that comes all the way up from metachas kisei hakavod. The only creature that has both ends of the spectrum completely, from the gashmias of the guf to the highest part of the spectrum, which is tachas kisei hakavod, malachei hasharis oilim v'yordim boy, is the tzuras ha'adam. That's the human being. Angels might be higher because they can't go down, but because they can't go down, they can't get as high as we can go up. When a person who has within himself a guf and a neshama, a gashmi and a ruchni, to the extent that he is ruchni neshama, to that extent he's connected to the Eibishter, so he has to make a part of himself bottle to that chelek. That's called anova. That's called humility. That's called taking the attitude where all I am is a chelek elokai mimal. It's identifying with the neshama. In as much as a person's a chelek elokai mimal, identifying with the Eibishter's hashpah through him, so what else am I? Ich bin garnished. The Eibishter, it's all you. Every koyach that I have comes from you. Every eitzah that I have comes from you. Where's the me? On the other hand, the more a person holds of himself, that means it's coming from the body part. It's the gas part. It's the thick part. That part is the opposite of the neshama, and that gets in the way of the shefa. Says the Maharal, gas ruach, which is rachok min haseichel, is the source of anius. That means it's the source of poverty, because when a person has no shefa, it's because all he is just thick. So where does a person identify himself? Is he identifying himself with the chelek haguf? This is what I do, this is what I want, and forget about what my neshama said. I'm not thinking about the neshama. He's thinking about himself. The more he thinks about himself, the less or of the neshama comes in. The less or of the neshama comes in, the less hashpah that there is. So the less of a mekar haburacha he is. Sayin gashmi and sayin ruchni. The more his opinion is important, that's what's called gasus haruach. How dare you say this to me? But if a person says, but who am I? I'm just an extension of what the Eibishter put into this world. Me, what do you mean you gave it to me? Eibishter, it's still by you. There's nothing from me. I have nothing. Garnished. Keneged Ra. When there's Ra in the world, then a person has to have, then he has to that's the a gaiva de kedusha. But al kolpanim Moshe Rabbeinu, like the Gemara says, Moshe Rabbeinu said, "Mi anoichi, was benich." You gave me the Torah. That itself, that Moshe Rabbeinu said, "Mi anoichi," that itself, the Gemara says, Perkei Avos. A person has to be, what's the lashon? A person, Ezeu Osher, Ezeu Gibor, Ezeu Chacham. Says the Nefesh HaChaim. Moshe Rabbeinu was tall and strong. He was a Gibor. Moshe Rabbeinu was rich. Moshe Rabbeinu was a Chacham. And with all of his milas, Moshe Rabbeinu said, "Mi anoichi." It's not that the person thinks he's a loser. The person attributes all of his success to what the Eibishter gave me. I have 10 fingers, so I'm going to feel great about myself. The Eibishter gave me these 10 fingers. It's a normal for me to be able to use. The Eibishter gave the person the seichel. The Eibishter gave me this gvura. So whatever I have, I know who I am, says Moshe Rabbeinu. I know I'm tall, I know I'm strong, and I know I'm the only one talking to the Rebbeinu Shalom, and nobody else is speaking to him, and yet he's still Anav Mikol Adam. How is that possible? He doesn't have any self-awareness? Of course he knows who he is. The Teretz of there is everything has nothing to do with me. I can't take any credit for it. And if you start taking credit from it, which place does that come from? That comes from the guf part of the person. That comes from the part of the person that identifies himself outside of the Eibishter. As soon as he starts taking credit, that's called gas. That's the part that doesn't identify with the Eibishter, and that's the part that shuts off the valve and doesn't allow the hashpah to come through. In as much as a person identifies with his chelik haneshama, so then a person says it's nisht mir, it's everything which is you. So then a person allows himself to become the vehicle through which the Rebbeinu Shalom brings the Rebbeinu Shalom's light into the world. So it becomes a source of bracha, becomes a source of parnasa, becomes a source of Torah v'gedula b'makom echad. It's not a stira for a person. The Avos HaKadoshim, every one of them were very wealthy. Because you're a Talmud Chacham doesn't mean you have to be poor. Because you're a Talmud Chacham, on the contrary, in the real correct world, a person who is connected to the Eibishter should be able to be a tziner. We live, unfortunately, in a world of Hester Panim, so it's not the way it's supposed to be. But in a correct world, when you had Rebbe HaKadosh, who was the person who wrote Mishnayos, he was also the person who had missed nothing. He had snoin, he had this, he had every single thing that was all the fruits, every type of season at Alzgahat, and he was a tzinor that everything came to him, and he was the person who was the author of Mishnayos. V'chahena. Even Rebbe Kiva, at one point he was very poor, but eventually Rebbe Kiva got money from here and money from there, and he became a source of hashpah. So this koyach, that a person who is successful in Kabbalas HaTorah and is also successful, says the Maharal, ki ha'oisher hu bracha v'shefa min Hashem yisbarach v'kemoi she'haTorah nimshul es l'mayim kach ha'bracha v'ashefa min Hashem yisbarach nimshul l'mayim. So therefore, v'kvar amarnu v'lekach ha'Torah v'ashefa ha'oisher shu einoi mugbal ve'enoro legasus haruach shu magbil atzmai. When a person's a Baal Gaiva, he's putting himself in a gvul. In a sense, he's taking his own sense of self. In as much as a person is mevatel himself to the Eibishter, he becomes connected to the Eibishter. The more he's connected, the more shefa comes down and the more bracha that there is.